Hi, it's Martin Perhiniak. Welcome back to PSD Tuts Plus and the Shortcut series. Today, I'm going to continue talking about guides in Photoshop, and if you are not familiar with them, I highly recommend to watch the previous video where I introduced how to work with guides and all the keyboard shortcuts you need to know about when you work with them. Today, I'm going to use the guides to create bleed and crop marks for a document. If you work in Photoshop, it's quite difficult to set up bleed. You can only do it when you save a PDF, which I'm going to show you now. So if you go to File and choose Save As, and there choose Photoshop PDF. Once you click on Save, if you work in Photoshop and you want to work with bleed, that is quite difficult because we don't have a feature for it. For that, we usually use Illustrator or InDesign. Don't ask me why we don't have it here in Photoshop. I think it would be a great improvement if we have a bleed feature. But even with saving PDFs, you can't set that option up. What you need to do is to do everything manually. Now, it can be very time-consuming, but I will show you two different ways to do it. Both ways will use guide. First of all, I'm going to create a selection based on size. So, by the way, this is a flyer, and I already have an extra 3mm on all the edges. So that's the extra size for print, which can be used for the bleed. And in general, we use 3mm bleed. So let me just select the rectangular marquee tool. And instead of using style normal, I'm going to use fixed size. Here I type in 3mm by 3mm. Okay. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to zoom out a bit and click somewhere here on the bottom left corner outside of my canvas. That created a little 3mm by 3mm rectangle, and I'm going to fill that in with white. Command or Control Backspace. Now I'm going to create a new layer and repeat the same step, but here on the bottom right corner of my canvas, outside of the canvas, to make sure it's on the edges, or the selection will be on the edges of the canvas. And then on that new layer, I fill that selection in again with white. So I have these two layers. Now I have these options turned on as well. View, Snap, Snap to Layers. Okay, that's also important because now we are going to draw the guide. And as you can see, I have that layer selected, that little white block on the right. So my guide will immediately snap to the edges of that little block. And I can draw another guide there. Then I can delete that layer and have the other layer selected. I'm going to draw the other guys now, snap to this other little block here on the left. Let me just do it again, just to make sure it snaps. If I zoom closer, you can see it snaps, and then I can do the other guide, and that will snap as well in place. And then I can delete that layer. And because the guides are not on layers, we don't have to worry about our layers, so we can delete those easily. So as you can see, with this little trick, we immediately created a crop guide with these 4 guides. So that will be the print size inside these guides. And everything outside of the guides is considered the bleed. To be able to show this to the printer, I will also need to use crop marks. And for that, I'm going to increase the canvas size. For selecting the canvas size, you can go to the image menu and there select canvas size, or use the keyboard shortcut Command Option C or Control Alt C. Now that we are in the canvas size, we can use relative changes. And instead of %, I'm going to select millimeters. And I'm going to increase the width and the height by 6mm because we need 3mm on each side. And I'm going to use canvas extension color set to white. So then I can click on OK. And as you can see, we already extended it with 3mm on all the edges. Now this part, because this is outside the bleed, can be called the slug. This is how it will be called in InDesign or Illustrator. And the slug is usually more than 3 millimeters, but at this example, I've set it only to 3 millimeters. Obviously, if you want, you can always increase it. Let's just say I want to increase it by 2 millimeters on each side. I can go back to the canvas size, again, use millimeters, relative option turned on, and then I need 4 to have 2 millimeters on each side. And I click OK, and now we have a 5 millimeter slug area where we can place our crop marks. Now for the crop marks, it's really simple. What I usually use is the line tool, which by default is 1 point size. And I can zoom a bit closer here and just simply drag a line there, another line there, and place this down quickly on all the guides here. Make sure you don't touch the image itself, even though that's not a big problem, but it's easier to notice that these are crop marks if they don't touch the image itself. And if I want to get rid of the guides, I can go to View and go to Show and turn off the guides. I use a custom keyboard shortcut for turning on and off the guides. It's Command-Shift-R, which you can set under the Edit Keyboard Shortcuts options. So now, as you can see, we have the crop marks in place and we have that on the slug. So this document is ready for print. If I save this into a PDF, even though we worked in Photoshop, we have the crop marks and everything ready for print. So just as a reminder, if I turn on the guides again, I go back to Show and Show the guides. Inside the guides area, that's the part which will be printed, and everything else around it is the bleeds and the slug with the crop marks. So this is one quick way to do it. I'll just quickly show you another way to set up the guides. I just go back in history to the original state, and I'm going to create a new layer. I fill that layer with white, for example, and then I'm going to use the free transform tool. And because last time I used millimeters for transforming, I have millimeters here, and I can just simply remove the size for this selected layer, which can be used for the guides, for the bleed. So if I have 6 millimeters width removed, that will make 152. And for the height, I need to subtract 6 millimeters. That will be 214 millimeters. Now, if I press Enter, you can see we have this layer which covers the printed area and shows the bleed area. Once again, this is just as a dummy for us to be able to place down the guides quickly aligned to that layer. Once we are ready with the guides, we can delete the layer. So if you don't mind counting and subtracting the sizes for the bleed from the overall size of your canvas, then you can do this way. Or if you don't like counting, then you can use those little square selections that I showed you. So there are two ways of doing this. But definitely working with guides can save you a lot of time. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you will join me next time as well. Thanks a lot for your attention today.